worlds in his vivid surrealist paintings. We all know what surrealism means. It's something that conjures a sense of the bizarre and the unexpected, or the irrational. But the fact that we do is entirely thanks to Dalí, who brought surrealism into the mainstream.
But with his eccentric appearance and absurd antics, many just dismiss him as a clown, a celebrity-hungry self-publicist. So was the art he created really that important? And has it changed the world we live in?
If you mention Dalí's name today, most people think of, well, they think of a big moustache and melting clocks. And I reckon that the persistence of memory is Dalí's most popular painting. This is reproduced and parodied everywhere.
What is it that makes it so compelling? Perhaps it's because Dalí paints impossible worlds in a very realistic way. They feel real, and in a sense, they are. Because Dalí's landscapes are based on a place that he loved, the dramatic coastline of the northeast corner of Spain. Dalí was born 30 miles inland from here in 1904. His father, a wealthy lawyer, was a strict disciplinarian, while his mother spoilt him, and it was Felipe who first encouraged Dalí's art.
His childhood memories, dreams and desires seared themselves onto his mind so much that arguably they saturate almost every painting he later made. Dalí once said, "I have been made in these rocks. Here have I shaped my personality. I cannot separate myself from this sky, this sea, these rocks."
Nestling in this rocky coastline is the town of Cadaqués. The Dalí family used to spend their holidays here. Dalí's childhood paintings of Cadaqués show his incredible natural talent. He made this one when he was just 15. When he was 18, Dalí moved to Madrid to study fine art. Here, he began to overcome his extreme shyness by developing a new, eccentric persona. He began to wear dandyish outfits and grew what would eventually become his famous moustache. His student art displayed outstanding technical ability, and Dalí certainly knew it. His shyness was transformed into unbridled self-belief.
He was actually expelled for making the outrageous statement that none of his teachers was good enough to examine his work. Going to Madrid was the first step in the young Salvador becoming Dalí.
To extract these strange visions from his deepest psyche, Dalí developed a technique that he called the paranoid critical method, based on Sigmund Freud's psychoanalytical theories. I haven't a clue what Dalí meant by this, so I'm on my way to meet psychoanalyst Darian Leader in the hope he can explain. We're meeting at the house in North London where Freud lived after escaping Nazi-occupied Austria. Dalí himself visited here in 1938 to pay his dues to the great man.
So this is Freud's study.
This is actually the study?
It is indeed.
This is the couch?
This is the Freud's original couch, indeed.
I've heard a lot about this quite complicated term, the paranoid critical method. What does it mean?
I think the main thing of interest is the notion of paranoia. This is what Dalí was really interested in the late 1920s, early 1930s, and then beyond. He saw paranoia as an essential mechanism in the construction of reality, so that when we see, let's say, some rocks or a cliff, we could say that's just some rocks or a cliff, but we could also see in it the human form, perhaps even something looking at us, a big pair of eyes, exactly what would be classified as a paranoid delusion. Dalí, in a sense, explores and develops this idea in his painting. So, for example, here, seen from one angle, we have a scene perhaps in a desert or on a beach, a number of figures in front of a dwelling with some trees behind it. Then turn it and we see fairly clearly a human face. Now, what's the correct way to interpret the image? Dali's saying that both of those ways of reading the visual data give us different answers, exactly the kind of emphasis on double images that Dali was so fascinated in. Dali's arguing we interpret the visual data that we're receiving, and we can interpret it in different ways, and that there's a fundamental question about how we interpret the world around us.
In the summer of 1929, basking in his success within the surrealist camp, Dali returned to Cadaqués,
where a major change was about to occur in his private life too. Before long, he'd meet his future wife, soulmate and lifelong muse, Gala. Soon, they'd buy a tiny fisherman's shack just over the bay here in the remote village of Port Legat, and this would be their home for the following 50 years. Over the decades, it expanded into a labyrinth of whitewashed rooms dedicated to dreams and pleasure.
Russian-born Gala was 10 years older than Dali, and when they first met in the summer of 1929, she was already married to the French surrealist poet Paul Eluard. But with Dali, it was love at first sight, and over the summer they grew ever closer, so much so that she left her husband and child to be with Dali. Gala became Dali's muse and manager. Over the years, she appeared in more than 50 of his paintings. She has been described as part tiger, part martyr, part mother, part mistress, and part banker.
This is Dali's studio. And what an amazing space. You can see immediately, look at these enormous windows just letting in all of this beautiful Port Legat light. He just had to look out the window and he'd see this view, which almost was like a ready-made painting. He just had to transcribe it on the canvas and there was a beautiful landscape. You can imagine a couple of melting watches floating there and you've got your Dali masterpiece. He always sat down in this white armchair and had the canvas arranged on this structure in front of him. And this is really, really ingenious. It actually allows Dali to move the canvas up and down through the floor so he could paint on this vast scale. And you can see all of his paints and brushes, the details so precise and were so important to him that he had to use these tools, these very, very fine sable-haired brushes to kind of get the effects that he needed.
With the exotic stuffed animals, the giant eggs, weird sculptures, and sexually suggestive shapes, it's like walking into one of his paintings. But then Dali took surrealism far beyond just painting. It permeated every aspect of his life. In the 1930s, he was a pioneer of the surreal object. He would combine unusual and unlikely everyday things, which, when together, would become something absurd, yet strangely affecting. As the years passed, his moustache grew ever longer, and his behaviour became ever more eccentric. Like a circus showman, he constantly engineered weird stunts that would attract headlines. One of many was his 12-metre-long loaf of bread. Many felt that Dali was undermining his reputation. They were dismayed that the man who'd created such groundbreaking and influential work was descending into buffoonery. But Dali's antics popularised surrealism, taking it far beyond the elite world of fine art.
Everything jumping and romping in a completely extraordinary eurythmic feeling.
And all your life will be to the rhythm of atomic explosion.
Exactly, one new kind of atomic and nuclear mysticism.
Dali died in January 1989. He was buried at the centre of the museum, which is now his mausoleum.